I'm Rhonda Boyd. I'm the program chair for the conference, and this is our plenary session, which we bring all the speakers from the previous plenary sessions together and have a discussion. And we have a moderator who I will introduce, and then I will hand it over. But I'm glad you all are still here on Friday and eager in the morning. So it is on my phone, and I will. Okay. So I'm introducing Dr. Vanya Jones, who is Associate Professor, Inaugural Assistant Dean of Community Engaged Research at the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health. Dr. Jones has collaborated with multiple local government and community organizations, including co-chairing the Baltimore City Health Department's Local Health Improvement Coalition with the Baltimore City Commissioner of Health. She's contributed to the Maryland Motor Vehicle Administration and the Transportation Research Board Older Driver Subcommittee on Safe Licensing and Driving Policy for Older Adults. Dr. Jones is a member of Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health Institutional Review Board, Expedited Committee, and serves as Associate Director of the Johns Hopkins University Urban Health Institute. In addition to her work as a community engaged researcher, Dr. Jones is an award-winning teacher and educational mentor. I will bring her up now.
Oh, thank you all. In those bios, I always try to put something personal, so like, you left that off. I know, I was like, because you're like, of course she is a faculty member at a university, and of course she does these things, which thank you very much. Oh no, I'm gonna say it. Yeah, my personal thing that I'm like, I have a goal in life to set foot on all 7 continents. Got 2 left to go, people. 2 left to go. So just saying, the personal thing is important. And if you are going anywhere near Asia and you want an invite or Antarctica, let me know. Those are my 2. Those are my 2. Thank you. I have decided to subtitle this. Am I really loud? Sorry, friends. Subtitle this a discussion amongst friends, because that's what we're about to do here. All of these individuals and you have come together to talk about something that obviously is near and dear to my heart, which is how do we create research that actually develops from a collaborative perspective, and how do we make that work? And so I'm going to start, and I was provided some great questions from the leaders and facilitators of SPR, and so I just want to thank them for inviting me. But I'm going to start with the big question, which I think is one that we're all kind of tackling, which is, how does the field shift the paradigm to conduct research that is truly community-led and uses a collaborative approach? And I'm just gonna open that up. And I know we have 2 people on Zoom. Are they here? Can we hear them? It's like not in yet. So they're not on Zoom yet. So there, thank you, voice in the back. So who would like to start? Who would like to just the paradigm shift question? Like we could do that. Introduce yourself.
Thank you. I'm so happy to meet you. I'm Allison Barlow.
Yeah,
Yes.
we've emailed, but
Yes.
yeah, we're at the same institution, so conversation among friends is truly.
Yeah, so that's great. Yeah, I think that there are 2 things I think will revolutionize the field. And one is we need to provide every possible training opportunity for community folks to be in the driver's seat. So how do we do more to provide prevention science training to Indigenous people, anyone, anywhere who are going to be leading their own communities? So that feels like essential to this. And then secondly, it's the power shift. So how do we, I think we really have to rethink this Western Academy altogether. It's a colonizing institutional approach to everything. So even what we value in our institutions in terms of publications as currency is antithetical to community engaged work. And how do we communicate results? All of the things that Western institutions put forth as the gold standard need to be rethought so that communities are engaged and comfortable, and we break down these walls. So I think that's one place to start.
Another place to, my name is Crystal Austin, and I work with the Johns Hopkins Center for Indigenous Health. I'm a proud member of the Navajo Nation, and I'm just really happy to just be here, a part of this group. So, we grew up in my community on Navajo. My grandmother, my grandfather used to say, which means listen to this, and so that you understand. And maybe that might be a very simple way of shifting paradigm, but it is this art of listening. We're often in this way of always thinking 2 sentences ahead. And so really just taking that time to step back and let people tell their story as you are embarking on a partnership with these communities. Listen to what they have to say and include that in what you plan to do.
Hi, my name is David Burns. I'm from the University of Toronto, and our prevention program is called RISE. It's an elder mistreatment prevention and response program. We have a few different models, but we typically partner with Adult Protective Services to address a system gap around response work. RISE is typically housed within a community organization, and then they then partner with APS through a sort of a complementary partnership. I would say that it's this is something I would say a learning curve I've had to go through over the last few years, in terms of thinking about and learning about community-based and participatory research methods, but then actually doing it. It takes a lot of time, and like to actually commit to a process, as I'm sure many of you know. But I mean, it actually does, and it's just as an example, when we were, this is just a small example, I guess, but when we were developing the survey tool, for our research, that is used to interview our clients, our survivors of elder mistreatment. I kind of, this was again just kind of, I did learn my lessons, but I came into it as the researcher with kind of like ideas and certain and engaged in a eight month process with our caseworkers, and throughout that time, it just absolutely transformed from what I would have initially thought was the best way to go, and they really led what the items and the questions ended up being. And it was a really intense, interesting process, and we got to a point where they would absolutely make fun of me for, as the researcher. And, but we started from very different points. They wanted to have 3 items that they would make up. And it was more coming from like, we're going to have more that are hopefully validated. But we got to a place where we kind of found common ground, but they came up with all of the constructs. And anyways, it was fascinating experience, but we met every week for about 8 months, and it's a process.
I think they have one. You keep pushing. So the question, just to repeat it, is how does the field shift the paradigm to conduct research that is truly community-led or collaborative? So like, how do we make this shift? We get time. I can recap over here, or you can just keep going and then I'll recap at the end. Just keep going.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Hello, my kako. My name is Blane Garcia. I also go by Kelekolio as well. I'm proud native Hawaiian of the community of Waianae, born and raised. Sorry, the podium. I'm really short, so the podium kind of blocks me on the guys on this side. And I'll try my best to really articulate this question, but I think simply what comes to mind with me is it's really coming in as a researcher, a community researcher. I think the main thing is not really coming with a strict agenda, and it really allowing the community to be the guiding force behind the work. And I think that's what truly creates community-led work. It's really allowing them to guide everything and what we do in the community and um, really tell us what should be done. And really, I think another simple way I can put it is we're really the tools and instruments for them, and they are working through us in a way and that we can just provide them whatever the resources that we can from our positions that we hold within the community. But really, they're the forefront of the projects that are happening in the community. And I hope I answered the question.
Aloha mai kako. I'm May Okihiro, also a community researcher and pediatrician at the Waianae Coast Comprehensive Health Center in Hawaii and faculty at University of Hawaii. So a couple suggestions that I would like to see happen is training, and I've said this in other forums. So this reciprocity with community and academia, it's got to be where we can train community members and they can advance their credentials, skills, and that it's recognized by funders and academia as something that's incredibly valuable, because we know it is. Also, the training of our community members who actually go to college or go to university and get those degrees, to not hold on to them in your academic centers, but to get them into community and to really look at how you do your finances so you can, even if somebody is an appointed faculty member at the university, that you can pay the community organization so the person is actually based in the community where they can be boots on the ground. And that's actually some manipulation with funding that I benefited from, and that's why I was able to stay in the community. And that's, I think, has been key. A couple of other things is consider that we might join other types of research, not just health research, but maybe environmental research and engineering research and other kinds of fields that's going to help our community grow. Because we say to heal the child or heal the family, you have to heal the community. And maybe that's not just focused on health research. So there's some really cool things happening in environmental sciences. For us, it's ocean and land, Aina. And then the last thing I'll throw out there, and this might take a long time, but is maybe funding should go to communities and not to individuals. And that's just a thought. Maybe a community wants to grow that, and maybe it will move the whole community to shift.
You did say that might take a minute. Can we hold it just before you pass on that? Because I don't know if anyone else is having the same questions that I'm having, but can you describe what you mean?
Well, I think it came from just listening to what everybody else had to say. When you fund an individual, that individual might be fickle. Because for me, it's taken 20 years to get to the point I'm at, where I feel like I'm finally getting it enough. I still have lots to learn, but we've built an infrastructure. It's still in development, but it's taken 20 years at being at the same institution in the community. So the Waianae Coast Comprehensive Health Center in relationship with the University of Hawaii. And I've got that dual appointment, which is really lucky and unique. And I think I'm the only one in Hawaii to have that. And I don't think that model exists at very, very many places. But I've been very intentional about making sure the funding is always at the same place in Waianae to allow that structure to grow. And I think that's really important. And I hear about the other successful models in other places like Alaska, and it's the organization serving the community, right? So these research assistants that we may bring in from the community and hire, they're not just doing that for 5 years. They're developing their skills and they're staying there and they have their their feet on the ground so they can help inform what comes next. Instead of individuals who may shift where they go, they may be there for a few years and then they move and move and move. And it doesn't grow that infrastructure within the community. So that's just a thought.
Yeah. Just sharing, I know somebody from Waianae. Kaholo Farms, yeah. Uncle Butch. Palito saha chifa ta hata pushi kan janspo chebete hoyo micha chata sia okay micha yo kokyo okla piscataway micha anacuston okla. Good morning, everybody. My name is Karina Walters. I'm an enrolled citizen of the Choctaw Nation of Oklahoma. Just made my acknowledgement for the land we're in and paradigm shift. It's a great question. I agree 100%. I think we do need to have community-based researchers, which gets to my point. If we had 1,000 PhDs in a room right now, how many would be American Indian or Alaska Native? Take a wild guess. Someone throw out a number. 5, 3, 1. We're not quite that bad, but close. It is 3. So we're 1/3 of 1% of the PhDs. But how many are doing research? Probably, then now we're going to get down to the little tiny piece of pie on that one, right? So, because most of us who go on to get higher education degrees like PhDs go to serve our communities and quite often end up in other kinds of helping roles, as a psychologist or a doctor or other kinds of things. So we have if we want a paradigm shift and we're not at the table, we're not going to have a paradigm shift. Let's be real. And that's an issue. And I want to give you an example why this is important, because the work that we need to do if we're going to develop prevention science means we're developing science that builds. In my career, I've really talked a lot about the importance of building from original instructions. Our ancient teachings have the foundation for a lot of our teachings for how to be a good, healthy human being and how to interact with the world in a good way. It also is about restoring relational ways of being in the world. Again, it's helpful if you're from that community and from that perspective to be able to do that. It doesn't mean allies can't do that and be a part of that, because I think absolutely we can be. And then the final thing is just thinking a little bit about this, is shifting our thinking from I own the data is mine, to understanding from my perspective, I am the data is me. And that fundamental shift begins to have a greater respect for understanding the medicine that is data. And so let me give you a paradigm shift for a minute and share an original instruction kind of story for a second, if I can have permission to do that. Long time ago, back in the old days, Bear has great medicine, still does today, but Bear had really powerful medicine. And Bear noticed that Rabbit was just not looking healthy and needed some support. So Bear decided he was going to feed him. Not eat him, but feed him. So he invited Rabbit over for dinner. And as Bear prepared the soup that he was making Rabbit, he did his prayers, he prepared it properly, made sure it was good medicine. And at the very end, for the final, he slit himself and cut himself open and put his energy and his body into the soup. Rabbit observed this. Rabbit thought, oh, wow, Bear is really giving a lot of himself today to really help me. I'm really grateful. That's really honorable. And of course, Rabbit ate that soup up and he got healthy and he felt really good. So he wanted to return the favor. But Rabbit is Rabbit. And Rabbit doesn't pay attention to protocols or the medicines or understanding that process at all. He decided he was going to serve soup the same way to Bear. So he invited Bear over, and Bear comes over and he's like, thanks, Rabbit, for having me over for dinner. I really appreciate that. And so then Bear is about to serve the soup and he cuts himself and then he bleeds out all over the place. And Bear's like, what are you doing? You haven't approached this right. You can't do it this way. And by then it was getting too late. So Bear said, oh my goodness, we got to call the doctor. Back in those days, Crow was doctor. And Crow was, not Crow, I'm sorry. I'm getting my birds mixed up. Vulture. Turkey buzzard was actually a doctor. And so he called for Turkey Buzzard to come over, and Turkey Buzzard came over and said, everybody has to clear this house. You have to cut a hole in the roof for me so I can create a fire. And for 4 days, they need to do ceremony here. So all the animals gathered outside the house and did their prayers, and they could hear, Buzzard doing his work in there. But something came over Buzzard that day. Buzzard became a little greedy. Buzzard lost his senses a little bit. And then all of a sudden from the outside, the animals heard, ah! They're like, what's happening in there? It's okay. It's, Buzzard's doing his doctoring. 4 days later, they went in to go check on Rabbit. Crow was gone. He went up through, Buzzard was gone. He went up through the roof. And what they found? A pile of bones. Rabbit was nothing but a pile of bones. Well, Bear was very upset. He knew Rabbit had done things in ignorance, hadn't done the giving of himself in a proper way, but didn't deserve that. So he told all the animals, go hunt for Buzzard and bring him to me. And then they got Buzzard. They found Buzzard. And back in those days, Buzzard was all white and had full head of feathers. And so Bear went to the sun and he grabbed the fire down from the sun and he put it down on the ground and he held Buzzard over that fire upside down. You know what happened to Buzzard's head, right? So Buzzard got his blistered head and he's begging for life. He said, listen, I won't do that again. I'm so sorry. And so Bear righted him and said, okay, here's the deal. You were a doctor before. We trusted you, but you violated our trust because of your greed. So here's your rule. You will still serve, but you're going to be our public health servant. You're going to go out and clean all the carrion. You're going to be in charge of cleaning the dead from this day forward, and you're going to make sure we don't get diseases. That's your job. And then I'll let you live. Buzzard said, okay, we got it. I'm going to do that. That's a Choctaw story. Now, we didn't call it a public health servant. I added that part. But we had a story that could tell us about research right there. NIH could be Buzzard. Researchers, we could all be Buzzard. We get greedy if we're not careful, right? The other thing is we could be Rabbit. If we're giving our information away, if we're not doing things in a proper way, if we don't understand the spirit of that sharing, then it can harm us, right? So our stories tell us about protocols even for how to do good research. We just have to pay attention and listen. Yakoke.
So you hold that one up there. I'm going to, just because I think it's really important to help summarize all the amazing information that we've gotten. We've gotten training from different perspectives. We've gotten training of how we do the work. We've gotten training for the people who we are calling community, who have their expertise. And when they get trained, how do we sustain that training in the spaces where they are needed and not drain them to the academic space? We also talked about listening to understand how we can, in fact, hear what the questions are from perspectives that are outside of academia and research. This gets us to this conversation that we had about power shifting, right? Like, where does the money go? How does the money get sent out? If you see, I'm trying to think through what we've just heard up here, because I think there's a lot that's happening. And if we are paying attention to only one part, I think our last story told us that we might miss out the big, threads that are happening. So some of the other things that we've heard around reciprocity, what does that look like, and how do we facilitate reciprocity? There is a reason why I'm recapping, because the next question's leading there. We're going to also, we talked about funding. We talked about and how the funding comes into community. We talked about finances, not just the funding, but how the finances are managed, right? We talked about building from the original structures, understanding the original structures that exist, and how we honor those as we move forward in the work that we do. I set the stage by recapping what was just said, because I think part of what we're trying to do here is lead and foster change from how we have perspective to lead. So I'm going to, again, throw this out here, and we can lead in any direction we want, but this question can be answered from many perspectives. If you were to start what you're doing over, which is in some ways what we do when we begin a new project, when we begin a new process, if you were to start it over, what are some of the things that you make sure you consider in the process that you want to make sure you carry forward? I know they're deep, right? They didn't get these questions prior. This is the first time they're hearing them too. Yes.
I think I'll go first because I feel like I'm the OPO on this panel, which is the next generation in this case. And honestly, this is a very deep question, but if I would try to think of it, what keeps coming to my now and what keeps telling me is I don't think I would change anything because I truly believe things happen for a reason. And although this journey for myself in the work that I've been under with May, who's been a champion in my corner and teaching me everything that I've kind of learned to this day, is it's a very treacherous road and we feel like we hit a lot of walls, but I think you learn and meet people along the journey, especially in the community that you never thought you'd ever meet and learn from. There's so many treasures in the community that are like all these hidden gems, but they're all these healing points in the community. And I think that's a part of the work. That's a part of what's happening in the community. That's a part of the vibe, the richness in the community that I think I wouldn't want to change because I feel like I would not be able to experience any of that if I haven't been on this journey that I'm on thus far. And it's still a long one and forever a long one. This is a lifelong process. Yeah, I think I'll kind of stop it there.
Okay. Anybody? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. We had this discussion a little bit yesterday about the community partners and agencies having the opportunity to be the PI, so to speak, or them being the primary applicant and fundee. And the last couple of big grants for RISE that we've submitted and gotten have actually that has been the case. The community agency has been the primary. And it's been really, really, I like just kind of thinking about all the things that we've talked about over the last couple of days. It's been really kind of powerful, I think, to see, because they're actually implementing our, like the intervention, and I think has like been quite empowering, and they have such a better sense of like the actual implementation, process, but something else that we talked, and I mean, just to be honest, I mean, like we talked about this yesterday as well, like part of that is also where I am at in my career. I mean, I'm a full professor now, so I don't, like if I was an assistant professor, I would, at least at my university, I would be under a lot of pressure to be the PI and to bring in the money, right? And I'm sure many of you are in that boat. So again, Renee talked about this a lot yesterday, but I think some of that has to do with a lot of this is like just kind of like the tenure kind of process and the pressures and kind of what's valued in that process to kind of get promoted. But anyways, just some thoughts.
Two things. One is, like, can we get rid of all the bricks and mortar? Like, can we just move out of these big old buildings and be living with the communities we work with alongside? Can we just stop this like capitalistic, making these campuses and universities otherworldly and not available, not open, not available, not accessible, invisible places? So I don't know how to do that, but we've had a little bit of a breakthrough where the most amazing colleague I've ever worked with, Melissa Walls, we wanted to recruit her to Hopkins so badly, and she wanted to stay in community, and the university actually said yes. So now she has this thriving hub that's right alongside the Fond du Lac Reservation, and more than 100 Indigenous peoples are working in their communities with her. And that's the perfect model. It's just a perfect model. There's so many imperfections, like, does she get the IDC from her grants to then distribute? No, that's going to the university. So there are many imperfections that have to be fixed, but that model feels like a beautiful model. And then I think the other thing is, how do we, I mean, it goes a little bit to your point, but we have to revalue why are people promoted? It's ridiculous what the metrics are if we really want to change the health of communities. Like, peer-reviewed publications are not changing the health of communities. So we have to have a new idea of how we value people who are really changing the health of communities.
Thank you for your comments. I think they're right on. A couple of others, just to follow up on that. I agree about peer-reviewed publications. One is they're hardly read, and we've got these paywalls all over now, so that makes community not able to access them. So yeah, I think I would think through data, how I would disseminate my data and my results in a more intentional way. So I'll tell you, if you look at my list of publications and how long I've been in research, you'd probably say she hasn't published very much, because after the second or third rejection, I just sometimes would, one, not have enough time, and two, I'd get super frustrated. And I know I'm probably not supposed to say this with junior emerging researchers right now.
Actually, I think it's helpful to convey to everyone in the room that successful, prolific researchers get really frustrated with that process too, and we are living it every day. So don't say it, right? Like, part of the paradigm.
Yeah.
It's frustrating.
Yeah, it's super frustrating. But how do community members get their information? Google, right? And if we're not at the top of those Google lists, they're not going to get the right information. So we have to really think through that. And I think we as researchers need to do a better job on how we think through how we're going to get the results or information to community members from the start. So, for example, I saw this really cool map of one of our ahupua or land divisions, and they had put on there stories from our kupuna, our seniors, and had put where these historic sites were, and then they had put some photos in there, and it was just really cool, and it was completely accessible. We have to do things more like that, and I heard some others are doing mapping. And then the last thing I'll comment on is the way that the academic hierarchy, but also the healthcare system embraces research, right? It's still the Western model. So even though we might come up with data or research that shows positive outcomes, I have a feeling that it's just going to be discounted for many years to come because we're not fitting into their model of the p-value. So
I love going after May because I feel like you always set me up well. I agree with everything. I love what everyone said, and I just to add to that, I actually couldn't think at first like what I would change. I'm like you. I feel like that learning is part of our growth trajectory and what we need. But one thing I would have done probably if I had foresight was, you know, I was frustrated quite often, and what motivated me to go the route I did to develop culturally derived interventions was not seeing models that reflected our realities and our worldviews and our knowledges. And I think I would have gone into prevention research earlier in my career. And so I think we actually need to get more Native scholars thinking about that a little bit earlier in their career. I didn't get into prevention research because I was more interested in first saying, well, how can we, design interventions if we don't even know what the factors are that are driving the problem? So I was more interested on the social epi side for a really long time. But again, I think I needed to be there. So the other piece is, I think, really thinking creatively around creating interventions and health promotion interventions that produce real sustainable change at the population level. And, so much we talk about, oh yeah, population health, but most interventions in our communities that I see tend to be focused on incremental individual change, and we aren't going to see a big population shift. And I know our tribal communities are saying, listen, that train left the station a long time ago. The population health has to change. So beginning to think about really creative, culturally derived, community-based, multi-level interventions, settings-based, not just in, the four walls of a 50-minute CBT session, for 10 sessions, but something that is completely outside of that box for us to really produce true change. And that's what I've been thinking. So.
And we have one more.
Sure. Thank you. I really want to go off of what you just said, because it's so true. I think that when we're thinking about really centering the voices of our community in the work that we do, again, going back to this idea of like listening, I wish, not I wish, but I know that is a really important, it's the central piece to everything that we're doing. And I think that just being able to remember that we have had Indigenous science, for a very long time. And any time that we're going in to build a program or to co-design a solution, that there's already a framework from which there is to start, and a lot of times we're building programming with a colleague of mine said this yesterday. She said that we go in with this idea of building a program and then we build culture around it. But it really should be the opposite. We go in and we have the culture be the centerpiece, and then we build the program around it. And so I think just really adopting that way of thinking and really uplifting the knowledge that already exists within these spaces is a really key piece to not only sustainability, but the buy-in and helping things to just making sense. And then a lot of times when we're also doing programming, I often think about I always think in the Navajo language first. And so when we're thinking about the various things that kind of lead to get at some of the data, that I always try to look at, to look through that lens of our language, and from that there's always this, some things may or may not be appropriate, when we're thinking about collecting information. And so that's also something that I've tried to practice, and we didn't do that in the beginning until I had to interpret something and then realize, oh my gosh, this is kind of a place where it's an opportunity to make some change here.
Thank you. In this summary, I'm going to touch on the theme that I heard happen, which was, we talked about stage of career, being comfortable to be able to do what you want to do at stage of career. We talked about frustration in what it means to be a part of the academic process, and how the academic process, from specifically the peer review process, which is critical to our trajectory as academicians, is a struggle. We talked about how we have the institution structure in and of itself, and I'm speaking to the academics right now. The structure itself fosters us to work in a very specific way that contributes to how we start or how we look at the work that we're doing. And when we're new in our career, that we're being told to act in a certain way. So when we act in that certain way, our understanding of what we're creating, what we're generating, really does need to shift from its very fundamental paradigm of centering the institution and the research. Now, that's what I just heard happen. There was lots of other information that you may have gotten. And the reason that I'm saying this is because I think the next question, and you might be asking this question too, if we know this is hard and we know this is fundamentally, we're constantly trying to fit into the metrics that everyone's trying to fit us into, how do we really start to make the change as researchers to facilitate? Institutions are made up of other researchers to facilitate this change that early career, I love the perspective of career up here, that early career faculty really can thrive and don't have to wait until they have the potential of freedom from their promotion to tenure and full professor. So who wants to start with that one? We had a volunteer early on this question.
I'm old enough now. I was a full professor before I became a Fed a year ago. So I don't know if I introduced, I currently direct the Tribal Health Research Office at the NIH. Prior to that, I was 30-something years as a academic. And what I really strongly believe that we give away too much of our power in a lot of these systems. And it's not to ignore that there are real power imbalances, because it's real. But there's opportunities to carve something out that's really critical to our health and survival in these systems that don't represent us, and we don't see ourselves reflected in it, which is cluster hiring. It's critical that we have cluster hires that happen early on, so that you're not the only one. Believe me, as an American, those numbers I gave you earlier, you're quite often the only one, not only in your department or school, but in the university in some cases. That my first appointment was at Columbia University. I was the only Native faculty in the whole school, university. So I had every student at my door who, and so the extreme role burdens that are placed on our backs that are basically we're not rewarded for, except for a personal reward because you're there as an auntie and you're there to help your people. So we need to have cluster hires so that we can have someone who mirrors ourselves, who sees ourselves, and that we can have that intellectual stimulation to grow and go. And I think that's first and foremost. And that's an easy fix. I mean, that's something that you work with your university to create search committees and say, if we're going to bring Native faculty in, we can't bring one. We need to bring in 3. Or we need to, if we bring in African-American faculty, it's not 1. We got to bring in 2 or 3. And there's some really, and it's even better if you get one person who might be a little bit further along in their career than the other. So you've got a little bit of a built-in mentorship support system. The other piece is don't ask permission unless you really have to. Beg forgiveness later. I'm just saying. It's true. So when Dr. Tessa Evans Campbell and I started the Indigenous Wellness Research Institute, we saw all these fancy centers getting all these millions of dollars. We had I had one small, my first R29 back in the day grant from NIH. And she had a kind of a program development grant for Indigenous students. So we said, let's just hang up a shingle and call ourselves the Native Wellness Center. And and make it like we're a big deal, even though, it's just the 2 of us. And we didn't know that at the time that there were rules at the university that you needed to go through to call yourself a center. But that's okay.
You might want to check on that.
You got to check that out. So we changed our name to an institute, and because then we didn't fall under certain rules, and it actually gave us greater freedom. And we did beg for forgiveness, and we talked to the university about creating a center. It was not a problem. But the point being, if we had waited and said, oh, can we do this? And we said, no, we're just going to do it. We're hanging up our shingle. We're doing it. And we had to change our name because it was Native Wellness Center at first. And what happened is a lot of people came in for, bus tickets and meals. And And we realized, okay, but so we put in research and no one came, so it was fine. So we called ourselves the Indigenous Wellness Research Institute. But that started a process because what then happened was other Native students, undergrads, and other folks said, hey, there's an Indigenous Wellness Institute and it's run by Native women or Native faculty. I want to check that out. And then people start to come because they see you've created a safer space, a place for intellectual growth, and a place to come together and close our doors and say, oh my God, I just had a colonial moment. Can I share? Because you need to have those moments, and you have to have someone there who can share that reality with you, because otherwise it's really crazy making. So that's my piece of advice as an auntie. There you go.
Who else? Who else? We're all part of the system. You had strong opinions.
Just one thing I just wanted to backtrack on, and I think someone said, I think it was Sandra, like genius is the ability to maintain two opposing ideas at the same time. And so we've been talking about, we have to get community members to be trained at the highest level so they can run this research. But who knows if this PhD style education is what's going to heal the planet, right? So it's not actually. So how do we value the incredible expertise within communities that has taken decades and decades for people to develop into healers, into community organizers, a million other roles that are what it takes to heal the planet. So I guess I'm thinking about that maybe like the idea of academic institutions should change so much so that all of the expertise that is in the world is represented and not just like, quote, academic expertise. And one thing we're going to start trying at our center is in various locations is to have elders in residence who can really help guide the work, take care of people when they're burnt out, reflect on the frustration as being so silly, like who really cares whether or not you're rejected by some journal that no one's going to read. So I think there's, I think like, how do we do this blended teams? And one other thing we've been able to do is we run an institute in Indigenous public health, and we were able to get permission. I don't know what happened. Someone was asleep at the wheel when we got it, but we were able to blend people who don't have degrees with degrees, and they can get graduate credits, which is remarkable, right? So people can come who could be a healer in their community. They could be running the diabetes program, but don't have a formal degree, but know so much more than someone who has a PhD in the same field. And they work together in these institutes to develop solutions to problems. So just thinking, how do we take that further down the road?
So one of the conversations that we've kickstarted is following up on that is there a way to provide degrees, credits to our community members with this expertise? Or if they don't want degrees, figuring out from the community what it is that they want so that over time they are empowered to do more research, and also they become they help build community and go towards earning a livable wage. So Hawaii's got the highest cost of living, one of the highest cost of livings probably in the world, and people are struggling. But if you have a community health worker or someone with a bachelor's degree or even a master's degree, they are not earning a livable wage in the community. And if we don't figure out a way that their experience can be acknowledged and their skills can be acknowledged, we're just continuing this hierarchy.
Kind of relatedly, when we think about really valuing the expertise of our community members. You know, many of our people and the knowledge that has been passed isn't just stories. It is a way of saying words, or it's a way of saying prayers. It is a way of singing these songs that have been passed through time immemorial. And so there has been longevity of many of much education and knowledge that has passed through. And I think it's a really beautiful recognition when institutions are able to recognize the value of those things. And, you know, and so really appreciate your comments here. The other thing that I think about is this idea around trust, you know, especially when it comes to funding. You know, for a long time, our people have been really subjected to other people's ideas of progress, other people's ideas of what success looks like. And all we need is to be able to just be given the funding so that we're able to do our work, you know? And sometimes we find ourselves in these spaces where we're always having to be creative on how to tell stories that matches, you know, these funders. But yet we need to do our thing and be trusted in doing so. And I feel like that is one of the worst ways of modern oppression, you know, when we are looking at my community and yet we are still under the thumb of other people telling us what to do and what we should and how we should do it. And I think that has been such a big marker and recognition for where we're at in this time. And so it's really reassuring to be able to learn about funders who are, you know, beginning to uplift trust-based philanthropy. And I hope that is something that we are able to see more and more of.
So I am, thank you for that. I appreciate the comment of trust, which is going to lead to my next question. But I also we had two speakers who weren't able to show, which opens up a little bit. This actually isn't true. I'm totally making this up on the fly, but go with me here, people. So I think there are a lot of people in this audience, based on the looks that we've been given as answers were happening, that may have some burning comments they would like to make to a point or two. And I was not told that I could do this, but we have like a few minutes. But before we get to that, so if you want to come to a microphone and comment and provide, again, discussion amongst friends, you are a part of the group of friends, please come up, provide comments, and we can broaden the conversation. But I want to take a minute on trust because I'm glad it came up. It was in my notes to bring it up if it didn't come up. Can you tell me from this panel, any perspective, what does that actually mean to you? And what does that mean from the perspective of the work that we do? Trust. Yes.
I apologize. I do have to step out a little bit before the panel ends, so I'm jumping in right now because I have another presentation I have to go give at 1:15 at NIH. So gotta hop on that metro. Trust. I think I have already expressed the importance of getting community members, and our panelists have, as well as really building from the community up and out, and trusting the community to trust themselves and their knowledges and their ways of knowing to come up with solutions that are going to benefit their health and well-being. And I think that is a fundamental critical component. I want to acknowledge one of the areas and barriers to trust, that even within our communities, there are echo chambers, and there's echo chambers that we live in here as well in professional communities. And I had one elder say to me, you know, when you go to that Washington, D.C., don't get caught up in one of those echo chambers. And I'm like, okay, what's an echo chamber? Tell me about that. And he said, well, you professional Indians, you know, you guys all talk to each other. And you all talk your historical trauma and your theory and all that. And then you pat each other on the back and then you go. It never gets to the ground, people. And he said, you don't forget the sickest and the poorest of us need your help. We are left out of that conversation, and we aren't even treated with enough respect to have the conversations about historical trauma, have conversations with the ground people. So he said, so those echo chambers, you guys get on your merry-go-rounds and you pat each other's backs. And he said, that's got to stop. And I was like, wow, okay, that's a charge. And he's right, because it made me really reflect. If we're really going to build trust, it really means getting out of our echo chambers. And professionally, we can get in our echo chambers. We have shared language that no one else understands what the heck we're saying. If you go to ethnic studies, it's really confusing. So, you know, it's these kind of echo chambers. So that's a lesson that I've taken with me here. So I don't forget who I'm really serving. And I think I'm looking to ways to break down those echo chambers to make sure that I don't get caught up in them. And when I do, I get myself off that merry-go-round, because I have to recenter and remind myself, we're here to serve the sickest and the poorest of our people. Bottom line. Right? So let's not forget that. And so I just want to share that with you. And that's, to me, a huge obligation. And that will build trust if we do that in a good way. So, okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Trust. Trust. We use it, we talk about it.
Trust is, it's really, I think that people that are outside of our community need to work really hard to earn that, right? And then people that are also from the community, like I am, there's also a way of understanding. And I really appreciate what my auntie over here said about listening to the people that are from the community, the people that are raised from the dirt floor like I am, like I was. And that's something that's very easy to forget. You know, when we come in and we're, you know, spewing all of these words that have very little meaning to the people that are being served, you know, we have to remember, you know, who we're talking to and who we're doing this for, and really help to translate the information so that it makes sense. But I come from that space all the time, with recognizing that there is really a shared experience of coming from this space where many of my relatives still are at, you know, and it's not a bad thing. It's not, it's hard, and this is the dirt floor of our hogans, where our fire is burning, where our water is kept, where our food is cooked. And it's important always for me to be able to remember that in anything that I do, because that keeps me anchored, you know, in the decisions that I have made. And so when we have other people coming in and trying to say that that way of life is wrong, or, you know, it's no good, then, you know, it really boils my blood, you know, when people start to kind of go down this road of saying things and they're not knowing. You know, my blood remembers all of these experiences that even my ancestors have dealt with. You know, it's something that, you know, when, especially in the last few years, there is sort of this, all of these things that had risen to sort of the you know, that kind of rose up, you know, where people are feeling that they are able to really share their outlook and experiences about race, even, you know, the oppression, the stuff that is happening right now, that, you know. And in the last few years, I finally, for the first time, felt a sense of fear, you know, when I'm in these different spaces, and I've never felt that before. And so, you know, and so it takes a while even for, so in that sense, I've always approached everything else with a lot of caution, you know, because I don't know what is what is this motive? What is this person's motive? Why do they want to know this, you know? And so I think that, you know, when in our communities, the families that are around this fireplace, that is often a very similar way of thinking. Why? Why do you want to know that? Why are you asking me this? Why do you, you know, what are you doing here? You know, type of thing. And so, but also like trust needs to be built from that side, but also trust in knowing that, hey, these are people that know what needs to happen for them to be able to really reclaim their health, reclaim their well-being, you know, and have that right to be able to do that, you know. And so it's just, you know, my work now is really in this space of development. And so that means that we're, you know, seeking resources that help to support the work that we do. And I hope that our funders are able to look at the way that we do the work, and we do good work, you know, and that they're able to trust us and able to know that we're going to, you know, maximize the impact of their support, you know, to us. So.
So as we are entering into our last 7 minutes, I do encourage you, come up to the microphone in the audience. Come on up to the microphone in the audience.
Oh, is this on?
Please introduce yourself. Is it on?
I don't think so.
You want help? Yeah, you have sound. This is what it meant to go off script. The microphones don't work. Then, okay.
My name's Andrea. I work at the center with Allison and Crystal, and I really appreciate everything that has been shared so far, and the conversation about trust and the conversation about sort of moving beyond the four walls of the institution, and the ideas around having, you know, these mixed courses of community members and academics from Johns Hopkins. And I think that all sounds really exciting, and that's what I believe in. And I think that I think the elephant in the room is, you know, the barriers, and one of the barriers being ego. And so much of changing this way of work and these institutional powers and the knowledges that we have to congregate to get this knowledge is so built in capitalism and, you know, all of these systems. And so just thinking about some of those sort of barriers, and especially this real barrier of letting go of the ego to change these works in on an individual way, on a professional way, and a systems levels way. Just wondering about your thoughts on that.
Fantastic question. So I'm going to turn it over to the panel. Question about ego and.
Sure. I'll try to like share an example, I think, for myself that maybe might be able to address that. One word that comes to me is in our language is ha'a, which is humility and being humble. But I know like in the academic setting, like our ego does kick in. But I think like in the long run, what I hope funders can really understand is that they should not even have a thought of having any ownership of whatever the models or whatever is being shared in the community, is because it's multi-generational knowledge that's been like shared over years and years and years, and there's no way that anyone should ever have a thought of even thinking that they can coin that process or that cultural protocol or that cultural practice that is the intervention, because we've known, our kupuna have known, like our ancestor has known that this has worked for us for many generations, and before even the word or term science came along, right? So we know that it works. And I think having that humility, which connects with the community trust, because if the community doesn't trust you in that process and they know that your intentions aren't right, they won't even share that with you to begin with, or they won't even allow you to experience that practice in the culture of whatever that community is participating in to begin with. So I think it's a tough one, but it's just always remembering where you come from, like your roots, your people, where you're centered from. And I think that's the best part, I think, maybe to help remind yourself if you feel like you're being stuck in that vacuum of ego is being hot on where you come from.
Any other thoughts about ego? And
I think what you said was right on in terms of academia and systems, right? So systems want to stay the same because one, it's easier. Two is they think in very small increments, like the next fiscal year or the next grant cycle, or the next tenure of the dean or the president or the CEO. And so it's going to be a very hard change. So for example, the university has embraced Native Hawaiian values that we come from, that's reflected. But man, there's so many faculty members who have zero clue about what that means and are come at a very Western, Eurocentric perspective. And my daughter just graduated with her BA and she's just ranting about all of that. And it is really offensive to her. And if we say things like the usual structure for promotion should be changed, that all those people who have tried to get their 200 and 300 publications, they're diminished. They're no longer up here. So it's those controls and all of that that we just have to keep pushing. And as she said, just do it and apologize later if you have to.
yeah, I think as the moderator, I will also say, as someone who writes reviews, letters of promotion, right? I get sent those packets to review. And if people call themselves community engaged researchers, I actually ask questions about, are they actually demonstrating community engaged work in their CV, which there's some trainings out there now to do that. And I think to your point, we don't shift in this process unless we shift where we put our values. And in our values, that's in the CV and the promotions process. So it might be working. So let's try. I think there was actually a person over here first, if I can, as I'm trying to honor my role as moderator here.
Thank you. I'm Taryn Bogdevich, Z, them, or they, them pronouns. I'm a research services senior professional at the University of Colorado Anschutz campus. And I just wanted to mention something around the space of trust. I think it's really important as we work with underserved populations that we recognize that the trust is already broken when we show up. It isn't there. And I think a constant reminder of that for the people that you work with, for people that are helping you seek funding, because I think what tends to happen is, we may work with an underserved community for a period of time and then disappear when the funding runs out, or we're not getting the results we want. Maybe this is the place we should pull the funding from. And so I think it's really important to keep that reminder that the trust wasn't there to begin with. So all of our work needs to be nurturing that and returning that. So I'm sure a lot of you can relate to that, but that's just something I try to remind everyone I work with all the time.
Yeah, thank you. And I appreciate the comment. I think that's part of what we're talking about. We can take one more comment because we're at time. You were standing so patiently.
Okay, thank you, Vanya. And thank you to all the panelists for being here. So my question has to do with rigor, because that's something that comes up a lot in conversations that I have with, oh, I should back up. Sorry, I'm Sarah and I'm a doctoral student at Johns Hopkins. And so we have a lot of conversations about community-based participatory research and engaging marginalized communities and leading their own research. But I feel like we always come back to, well, if communities are leading their own research, is it going to be considered rigorous? And do we have to kind of like redefine what rigor is? So just curious on your thoughts about assuring rigor when communities are leading research, and if that's something we should even be concerned about.
This is a big question to end on as our last one, but this is what it means to be amongst friends. Were you going to say something, Blane?
It's probably not appropriate.
Oh, now we got it here. He said it's not appropriate as long as there's
system let you think otherwise or doubt that process of your community work is not rigorous enough. because I think the value should really come of importance to the community and what they believe is upmost, right? Like it shouldn't matter, I think.
It's one of those things that definition of rigor is from the Western Academy, and it's messed up. So, we use RCTs and find average effects, and we don't know what subgroups are experiencing. And so we're not really doing real work that's going to be transformative. We have to understand how people want to solve their own problems and learn from one another. And when we do that, we'll be changing the world. So that the word rigor should just be tossed out because it's not important.
We are at time. I will end trying to tie together and address what you just said, which I think is at the crux of things like trust and things like promotion. The reason that I'm in the role, I am ending my first year as the inaugural Assistant Dean for Community and Engaged Research at the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health, which is one of the reasons I was asked to come talk to you. And what I have had to do in my career as someone who's been told that over and over again, we've heard about the need for people who have lived lives and been abused and used by research. We have been told that that is their problem, that they need to go to the doctor, take the pill, do the thing. And in order to have gotten to this point in my career, I had to know a lot more about what people were telling me rigor was. So when they asked me questions about the research that I was doing, I could actually tell them what their challenges were, as well as address the questions. I couldn't change it when I started, but we don't get an inaugural Assistant Dean of Community Engaged Research. And believe you me, I'm not advocating for you taking this role on. The curtain has been pulled back. But when you get to the points where you can start making change, because you've learned what the questions are that they're going to anticipate, those are some of the things that make, in my opinion, the shift. It's why I was happy to come talk to you. It's why I do the job that I do. It's why I loved the discussion that we had just now and wanted to hear from you. So what I'm going to encourage you is one of my favorite Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. quotes is that it pains some people to do the hard work. Please go out and do the hard work, because the only way we make this change is if you go out and say this is important, so we're going to change academia together. So thank you all. Thank you for joining us. Go do the hard work. Rigor can exist and make a difference for us in the same way. Thank you.